There's a moment every company fears. Not the moment something breaks, but the moment someone asks who's responsible. In the late 1970s, across quiet suburban neighborhoods in America, engines were stalling in the middle of intersections. Highways turned into hazard zones. Pickup trucks, the same trucks families trusted to haul trailers across state lines, were suddenly losing power without warning. Drivers described the same feeling. 1 second, they were cruising at 60 miles per hour. The next, silence. No sputter, no warning, just dead weight. And when the steering wheel locked and the brakes stopped responding, it wasn't just an inconvenience anymore. It was terror, because what many of those drivers didn't know was that under their hood sat one of the most controversial V8 engines ever produced by General Motors. And that engine was about to drag the world's largest car manufacturer into a legal nightmare worth millions of dollars. At the time, America was changing. The golden age of muscle cars was fading into the rearview mirror. Insurance premiums were rising. Fuel prices were climbing. Washington was tightening emission standards, and Detroit was feeling the squeeze. Big horsepower was out. Efficiency was in. And inside General Motors, executives were scrambling to reinvent themselves for a new era. They needed something lighter, something cheaper, something that could meet federal regulations without gutting performance entirely. So they built a new kind of V8. Not for racing glory, not for NASCAR dominance, but for survival. It was supposed to be the future of American trucks, a bold leap forward that would keep GM competitive in a rapidly evolving market. It would power everything from worksite pickups to family haulers across North America. And on paper, it was brilliant. But engineering doesn't happen on paper. It happens in factories, in assembly plants, under deadlines, and sometimes, under pressure, corners get cut. In the rush to meet emissions targets and production quotas, GM made a decision that would quietly haunt them for decades. They redesigned key components of the engine using lighter materials and new casting techniques meant to reduce weight and improve fuel economy. It worked, at least at first. Dealerships moved units quickly. Customers praised the improved mileage. Fleet managers began placing bulk orders. GM's quarterly numbers looked promising again, until the complaints started. At first, they were easy to ignore. A stalled engine here, a locked-up truck there. Warranty departments logged them as isolated incidents. Dealership mechanics replaced parts and sent customers on their way. Corporate memos downplayed the issue. But then came the reports that couldn't be buried. Engines seizing before 30,000 miles. Vehicles losing power in traffic. Crankshafts snapping under normal load. One owner in Ohio described the moment his pickup died while towing a camper down an interstate ramp. Another in Texas reported a sudden stall while merging onto a freeway, narrowly avoiding a multi-car pileup. And they all had one thing in common: the same GM V8 under the hood. Inside the company, engineers began raising alarms. Testing data revealed abnormal wear patterns in critical engine components. Metal fatigue was appearing far earlier than expected. But redesigning the engine now would cost millions. Recalling thousands of vehicles? Even more. So the machines kept rolling off the line, and the failures kept piling up. Soon, independent repair shops began noticing a pattern. Entire fleets of GM trucks were arriving with identical engine damage. Lawsuits began forming quietly in the background, first from individual owners, then from commercial operators whose livelihoods depended on reliable transportation. Construction companies, delivery services, utility contractors. When their trucks failed, their businesses failed with them. And suddenly, this wasn't just about engines anymore. It was about lost income, missed deadlines, accidents on public roads. In one case, a stalled GM-powered van triggered a chain reaction crash involving 3 other vehicles. Insurance claims followed. Injury lawsuits soon after. By the early 1980s, attorneys across multiple states were preparing something GM hadn't faced on this scale before: a coordinated legal attack. Depositions began pulling internal documents into the light. Engineering reports that mentioned premature wear. Test results that hinted at long-term durability issues. Emails between departments debating whether the engine could survive beyond standard warranty periods. And the question kept coming up: did GM know? Because if they did, this wasn't just a defect. It was negligence. Media outlets began picking up the story. Consumer advocacy groups demanded accountability. Trade publications questioned whether Detroit's rush toward efficiency had sacrificed reliability in the process. GM responded the only way a corporation of its size could, with silence. Publicly, they denied any systemic issue. Privately, they assembled legal teams capable of fighting lawsuits that stretched across state lines. But the courtroom doesn't run on marketing language. It runs on evidence. And as more engine failures were documented, plaintiffs' attorneys began constructing a narrative that would cost GM not just money, but reputation. They argued that the V8 engine's design made catastrophic failure inevitable, that drivers had unknowingly been placed at risk every time they turned the key, and that GM had chosen profits over safety. When the first major lawsuit reached settlement negotiations, the figure reportedly crossed into the millions. But it didn't end there, because settling one case didn't fix the trucks already on the road. Thousands of them, still driving, still failing, still putting drivers in danger. Soon, class action discussions began surfacing, the legal equivalent of a corporate nightmare. Internal projections estimated potential liability costs soaring into the tens of millions if the issue wasn't contained. And containment meant one thing: acknowledgement. But admitting fault would open the floodgates. So GM faced a decision that went far beyond engineering. Protect the brand, or protect the balance sheet. Behind closed doors, executives debated whether quietly phasing out the engine would minimize attention. Production schedules were adjusted. Replacement designs were accelerated. Marketing shifted focus toward newer powertrains. But the damage had already been done. Owners compared stories online. Mechanics shared repair photos with trade magazines. Word spread that GM's new generation V8 might not survive the mileage printed on its own odometer. Trust, once lost, is expensive to buy back. And lawsuits don't disappear when a product does. Years later, some of those affected trucks would still be running, ticking time bombs beneath faded hoods. Others had long since been scrapped after catastrophic failure. But the legal fallout lingered. Court filings, confidential settlements, non-disclosure agreements that kept the full scale of the problem out of public view. To this day, GM has never fully admitted that the V8's design alone caused the failures described in those early lawsuits, which raises an uncomfortable possibility. Was this truly an engineering mistake, or a calculated risk taken during one of the most uncertain eras in American automotive history? Because somewhere in a warehouse archive, buried beneath decades of paperwork, may sit the answer. A memo, a test result, a warning that someone chose to ignore. And if that document ever surfaced, it might explain why one V8 engine forced General Motors into a multi-million-dollar legal battle that still casts a shadow over Detroit's past, or why they were willing to pay so much money to make sure the truth never reached the road.